Welcome to our new show, the What Anyone Can Do podcast with Leo Batari and me, Randy Cantrell. Our new show picks up where the last show, Year of the Peer, left off, highlighting the simple truth that who you surround yourself with matters, and that if we enlist the support of others, give back to those who give to us, and pay it forward for the next generation, we can do anything. Author and keynote speaker Leo Batari and I will interview a diverse group of thought leaders who will share stories and insights that will help you succeed in business and in life. How? By doing the things anyone can do, but most of us never will. Welcome to another episode of What Anyone Can Do, the podcast. He is Leo Batari. He's the star of the show. I'm the co-host, Randy Cantrell, the co-pilot here. Leo is the pilot, so he's back home. We've kept you up to date on his UK travels, and when we last recorded with Jeffrey, you were in Denver welcoming a new grandson, so good to be back home, I assume.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, though. Hard to, remembering, Nora, first granddaughter is just over 2 now, and she's still a little, peanut, right? Well, this kid, 8-pound baby is a good sized baby, but they're just tiny. I mean, it's just amazing, So yeah, it was funny because I saw him, would have been on Wednesday night for the first time. He was about a week old or so. And he slept the entire time. So I met him on Wednesday, but he didn't meet me until Thursday. That's kind of how I think about that, Yeah. So, but it was all good, and pretty incredible. Kind of, we touched on it last week with Jeffrey Hazlett too. I think these things kind of, give us a sense of purpose and give us a sense of not only giving back but paying it forward, and trying to think about, how we can best equip those people who are, whether they're emerging leaders or emerging followers or whatever, however they're going to contribute, to just set everybody up for success. And, no better way than for all of us to help each other do that. And speaking of that, talking about success, right? I mean, before we get into kind of talking about, the kind of central topic of today, where we want to hit on, a bit of accountability and kind of what that looks like, particularly, in the workplace and its relationship with trust. But this weekend at the Masters was a truly remarkable thing. It was, you could argue the greatest comeback in the history of sports. I mean, it was really, although I will say, as much as I really enjoy the Washington Post as a publication. I was so unbelievably, disturbed by their article. So they run a piece after the tournament, and you have this incredible victory, and this thing happened, and all they can talk about, like the first line was pretty much, well, he's still behind Jack Nicklaus, but I guess it was okay what he did. I mean, it was horrifying. I mean, the whole first paragraph was pretty much about, it didn't at all talk about like what happened in the moment. Whatever it could do to bring back the past or to bring back, these other things was just, it was. This is why people hate media, because they do crap like that. And I think that was beneath the Washington Post to begin an article that way. I think it was just horrifying. But I know you said you're not necessarily a big golfer, but you love the Masters, love the tournament.
I've played twice in my life. I watched the Masters. I watched the British Open. For some reason, with the history, of course, what's not to like about the Masters? The scenery alone is pretty riveting. But it was riveting TV. I know that the ratings weren't quite what they were last year, they said, but because they had that early start. But for morning golf, the numbers that I read blew the lid off, of any ratings for morning, which includes the British Open, which is televised because of the time difference. That is morning golf for us here in the States, but the article I read, it blew those numbers away. So
you bring up a great point, and kind of why I wanted to talk a little bit about the Masters this morning too, is that what a team effort these things are, right? So let's even put the Tiger team, if you will, aside for a moment, and talk about what it takes when all of a sudden they're looking at weather on Sunday, and they take an entire schedule. Imagine the coordination involved in that and what they had to do, where they had, because it's typically on Sunday, you've got the twosomes, they tee off starting at a certain time and going through. And I think the last twosome ends up probably teeing off close to 3:00 Eastern time or in that ballpark. And they had to take that whole thing, looking at weather coming in and realizing that they weren't going to win that race, and that they had to get this tournament over much more quickly, because it would just ruin the entire event. So sure enough, they not only moved up the starts, but decided we're going to go in threesomes. We're going to tee off on the front and the back nine and do that. I mean, it was a really unbelievable contingency plan, really, to get that tournament in when it wasn't, caught a little rain, caught a little wind here and there, but by and large, that was very playable conditions for those guys. And I just thought it was an extraordinary effort on everybody, those who worked at the club, to television, to the players, the
logistical nightmare of it is hard to fathom.
I mean, we kind of hear as the public that, they're just going to move it earlier and they're going to play. And then you should give that some thought about what that took to make, and blew out the whole CBS schedule in the morning. They've got Face the Nation. They got all these Sunday programs and everything. It's like, no, done. This shows you, it's not like they put the Masters on tape delay, that wasn't going to happen. Yeah. So,
it shows you the teamwork and the clout that the Masters has with CBS. But
there's definitely that, But
and they mentioned that Tiger. I mean, just because of his health issues, you're talking about Team Tiger. I mean, that he had to get up. That he got up at like 3:30, 3:45.
Yep.
Their time, just to try to get his body.
To get his body ready, but I think, and part of that was his obviously 4 back surgeries but also, you just, 43 is pretty young to us still, but, for him, to be out there, basically the second oldest player ever to win the Masters. And it was just an amazing thing. And to hear him interviewed afterwards and talk about the fact that they said to him, "Did you always know that this was going to be possible someday?" And he said, "Absolutely not." He said, "There were times where he couldn't walk, couldn't sleep, he couldn't stand, he couldn't sit, nothing felt comfortable. Never thought he would play." And then, of course, we saw when he tried to come back that one time, and he was he was duffing chips and everything else. In fact, they said that there was a point where he dropped basically out of the top 1,000 players in the world. And think about that. Yeah, from a guy who was, there was no second place. There was just, there was Tiger and then just everybody else, for a long, long time there. But I think really remarkable when you think about not only his personal perseverance, but again, to talk about the team of people that helped get him ready, not only just for that tournament, but over the years, everybody from, medical team to being mentally ready, to compete at that level on that stage, to do all the things that were necessary to his caddy, his swing coach. His family. Everybody, and you think about it, and we joked about this before we got on, for most of us, we're not trying to win the Masters after having 4 back surgeries. You know what I'm saying? We're just trying to do something. We're setting some goal and we're doing whatever, and realize that if we can surround ourselves with the right people, they can help us do extraordinary things for sure, but even just some of the ordinary things that we want to make sure that we keep, as part of our life. And, it amazes me to watch him do something like that. I think it should be an inspiration to us all who like I said, we're not trying to win the Masters. We're not trying to compete in the Olympics. We're trying to do things that in the scheme of things are pretty doable. Yeah. And yet left to our own devices, oftentimes we just don't go there. We don't push through. We don't, there's a lot of, research that basically says that we were really never serious about our goal to begin with, which is why we cut ourselves a break so quickly about it.
Right.
But to the extent that we are serious about it, it really helps to be surrounded with the right people. And I'm pretty sure that Tiger would say that without the help of a whole lot of people, there's no chance he comes back. And I think it was an extraordinary thing to watch.
One of the first tweets that I saw after the thing was over, somebody had already captured the video snippet of him going up to his caddy saying, "We did it," and they captured the audio. I mean, here it is, a supremely individual sport,
and it wasn't, I did it.
Goes to the caddy and says, "We did it," which was a cool moment.
Yeah, very much so. And I think it really speaks to that. But you remember, I mean, we were on the podcast and we'd ask people all the time who were really successful, did you do this all by yourself? And they'd laugh, I mean, it's preposterous, we just don't. And so why, we don't like, it's kind of funny. I wrote a piece a few weeks ago talking about peer groups, because peer groups, oftentimes they feel like, oh, people that participate in peer groups are like, they're like troubled or flawed, or they've got they need help, right. like they regard peer group like it's going to the hospital ward instead of going to the gym. Right. So, it isn't about trying to make sick people well. It's about trying to take people who are fit pretty much, or want to be fit, and go and look at, how do we get better? How do I surround myself with the right equipment, the right instruction, the right people, so that I'm in that environment where we're all doing things that not only get you working out, but pretty much you're now hanging around with people who are eating healthier and doing all the things that are going to help get you to a certain place. And I mean, that kind of stuff is just, so important, but it's the way we think about it. Again, it's not about reaching out to other people because we can't do it ourselves, or because there's something wrong with us, or because we're sick. It's we reach out to people because we're smart. Because if we have resources available to us and we're letting them sit on the sidelines, then we're out of our minds. And I think that's, to me, I hear about it all the time with young people, when they may have a contact, or they have a friend who knows someone at a company who they built some kind of a trusting relationship with, and they're like, "Oh no, I don't want to ask that person, or I don't want to say anything because I want to do this on my own." Well, I think you're an idiot if you think about it in that way. I mean, I really do. It is like, yeah, I want to get this job and I want to advance my career, but by the way, I want to take this leg and I want to chain this to the chair, and then I want to put my other arm and tie it behind my back in some way. And it's like, well, sure, you can do that, but it just really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think it's really about, in life in general, just understanding all of the resources we have around us. It could be tools, it could be money, it could be education resources, it could be other people, whatever it happens to be. Whatever we've got around us that we can help put us in a better position, and for us, conversely, to be helping others when asked. That's what we do, And
well, here in Dallas, we had another sports figure, Dirk. 21 years in the NBA. And it's funny, in a town like this, very pro sports town, every time an athlete retires, one of the first things you hear is what they're going to miss. And what they're going to miss most is not necessarily on the field or on the court. It's that room. It's the room of room of the guys that they're playing with.
Yep.
That's what they're going to miss.
Because they ultimately, you look at any great team, and we've talked about this. I don't care if it's in business or in sports or whatever, which is kind of a nice segue into what I think we want to talk about today, is this idea of people playing for each other. It isn't about playing to impress your boss or to win over your coach or something like that. I mean, they play a role in that team, but ultimately great teams play for one another. They have a clarity of purpose, and they're aligned, and they understand what it takes to get something done. I think in most cases, when you think about sports teams who are really great sports teams, they don't look at winning the championship as the goal. They look at it as the reward for the goal being, how do we get better every single day? You know, their goal is to do that. And they believe if they do that, championships will follow. You look at, companies, whether it's, the one I talked about in the book, and MullenLowe, who's really about producing the greatest, in their minds. They have people who are committed to the work, and they know if they challenge each other and do so from a place that isn't about, again, fighting against each other. It's fighting for the best idea. And they know that the more that a lot of smart people do that with one another, the more that they'll be able to create things that no individual in that company, no matter how smart they are or how creative they are, could ever do by themselves. And, it just says something about our approach to these things. I mentioned to you in our doctoral program, our currency in that program wasn't about trying to get a or trying to, bring an apple to the professor, right, and impress there. But you were on a lot of different learning teams and group projects and things. And your currency in that program was really about how you showed up for those other people. And also how much we depended on one another, and had to trust one another. When something happened and life got in the way, the first thing you would do is you picking up the phone or your email or whatever, and you're telling your team members, hey, here's what just came up, and they'll rally and help you. You'd keep it to yourself, or you don't say anything, or you submit something late, or these other kinds of things. That doesn't help anybody. But when you've got that open, trusting environment that allows for people to have each other's back, it creates this, not so much a culture of accountability, but I like to think about it in the way we've talked about Pasi Sahlberg from who used to be Director General of the Finnish school system, who basically said in the Finnish language, there's no direct translation for the word accountability. It's what is kind of left when someone's personal responsibility or sense of personal responsibility gives way. So I think if we all come to it with this idea, because I'm going to bring my A game, because I believe that's my responsibility to myself and to my team and to the work, then you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. Your team members, through their own modeling and their own ability to ratchet things up and keep you all playing at a higher level, aren't holding me accountable. They're just helping me, advance my own performance, so.
What do you think are some of the biggest hurdles, and not just for leaders, but just team members? If people in our audience are members of a team, and many are, and they may be a leader, but they don't necessarily have to be. I mean, from a position where you don't have a title, what are some suggestions that you could make that could help a team member facilitate that and hopefully grow that in the team, other than their own openness and vulnerability, which I would think would be probably up at the top of the chart?
Yeah, I think it is. I think team members who model good behaviors and who are open and who trust first, in
spite of it all,
but I also think that if you look at it beyond that, organizations have to create the proper context for these kinds of things. In other words, you can't be all about team and family and blah, 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 and the way they all talk about it, and yet have all the compensation, reward programs, everything be all individually based. You've got to think about, how do we align everything so that when we're talking about the importance and value of the team, then that is how we look at it through and through, with every single part of how we do anything in the organization. And I think that this is where every department in a company can get involved in figuring out, well, how do we reinforce this notion of team? What does it look like? One of the stories I remember years ago. I won't even, so I'm at a multinational firm, basically, right? And the interesting part was they actually did as good a job of anybody I've ever seen put together global teams to help serve clients, right? So if you're a big multinational client, you want to make sure that you've got the all-star team, then this firm was really great about saying, whatever the best talent is available to help you do, we're putting that team together, and that's how that's going to go. And did it really, really well. Well, here is the funny part. There was also an aspect of offices having individual P&Ls that they were responsible for. So let's say I'm running an office out of Chicago, and maybe the best person, is out of London or, out of, Los Angeles. But, that money goes to their office if I bring that person to the table, right? So now I'm thinking, well, how do I keep some of that revenue? So when times start getting a little difficult, all of a sudden now you're not getting Michael Jordan and Larry Bird. You're getting the people who are filling in for them, right? So they're good, but they're not them.
Right.
And what would happen is clients started to notice that they weren't getting that A+ team that they were promised. And what you would end up have happen is you'd have these large clients who would go away only because somehow there's this internal piece about which office is getting what amount of money. Now nobody's getting anything, because so clearly what you've got these conflicting policies taking place, right? You've got a general manager of an office who's trying to do the right thing and have the P&L and make his numbers or make her numbers right they're supposed to, and then you have this larger promise that was made to clients, and you'd watch that promise give way to the local office P&L. And so there were some real changes that had to happen in order for you not to have these conflicting type policies. So I think it's very similar when we start looking at teams and how we speak to teams and individuals and what that looks like and how people develop, that it has to be aligned. They have to support. Otherwise, you're just constantly going to fight that battle.
The Dallas Stars, here to make another sports kind of a metaphor. The Dallas Stars, for the first time in a number of years, are in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and as in that sport, one position can dominate the goaltender. And so last night they're playing Nashville, and Ben Bishop, who is, if not the top goalie in the league for Dallas, just had a horrible night. First goal, a junior goalie could have stopped. It was just one of those nights. And he's so good on home ice that out of every 6 home games, one's going to be a shutout all season long. So that's how spectacular this guy is. And it was interesting to watch the team try their best to pull him out. They knew he was struggling, and they fought like demons. They got behind by 2 goals, and they came back, tied it. He gave up a soft goal to lose the game. But for the last 3 minutes, these guys were – it was interesting to me to watch how furious they were fighting to try to get that tying point to help this guy out. And immediately after the game, they all said, we wouldn't be here without him. So,
right,
for anybody to say this is on him is kind of crazy. But that kind of team, what we call team chemistry, seems to me to really largely be about that kind of stuff. That team, that individual, and yet I get where I fit in all of this, and I've got to do my part to help him out because we both benefit.
And I think goalies are really exposed in that way because really the only thing you're responsible for as a goalie is stopping the puck from going in the net. And there's really no other ways that you can really contribute very easily. And right. So you think about like basketball or so many other sports where even if you're having a bad shooting night, you can get steals, you can play good defense, you can get offensive rebounds, you can do the kinds of things that can still make it. You didn't have a good scoring night, but it doesn't mean you had a bad game, right? So the goaltender, on the other hand, has this terrible, in a way, in this terrible situation, is that's what they do. And if you're having a bad night, there's really no other way, to contribute in a way. But I think it also speaks to another point where those players also understood that in the course of 3 periods in a 60-minute hockey game, there were a lot of things that happened that contributed to the fact that Dallas didn't score more goals, or that, other things, so yeah, I think that we all realize, because we always love to see, someone makes or misses that last shot at the end of the game, and it was because they won it or they blew it or whatever. And yet, really it was the last thing that happened, and we all leave with that. But at the same time, there was a whole lot that happened over the course of the game that contribute to why you were in that position to begin with, one way or another.
But even in a losing effort, I think most everybody can relate to that. That's what you kind of want to be a part of. Want to be a part of a group of people who have got your back to that degree and are not quick to dogpile or point the finger. It's that age-old thing. If you're into the boat sinks, then so does mine.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point with regard to, winning together is one thing, but how you support one another when you fall short, is a whole other thing. And that's where great teams, I think, are really tested. It's not about pointing the finger. It's like, hey, we've been in this together all year, and every night somebody steps up and does something and contributes to where we are in this moment. So I think the fans are much tougher on a player who may, falter at the end of a game or something like that.
Yeah,
and the team members get it. They're like, really? It would have been nice if the shot fell, or it would have been, but the bottom line is that, to your point about the goaltender, they're not even in the playoffs without that goalie playing, as well as he did all season long.
The other interesting thing to me is, as you look at the business landscape, leaders and at any level, whether they're just team leaders, whether they're directors or above, I would think that I don't know any stats, and you may, but the turnover, companies are continually pressing for retention in a day and age where there's a lot of transient behavior in the workplace, a lot of leapfrogging. But in my experience, when I have found, whether it's clients or whether it's companies I was running, people that had that, that bond, that team accountability, and you don't want to leave that. You don't want to leave that.
People, you get on a team that really has clarity, of purpose, and they're committed to one another. Those employees are going nowhere. That's what you want to have. And you just hope, I think the tricky part is sustaining that. We can all get pretty comfortable really quickly and be thinking that, hey, this team is firing on all cylinders and all, without realizing what it took to get there. And staying there is really difficult. In sports, as we know, getting to the top of the mountain is one huge milestone. Staying there is a whole other challenge. And and I think that's particularly required of teams and companies today. This isn't about, we had a good season last year, and it's all that forgiving the following year. You're constantly challenged to try to, keep up and to remember what it takes to stay at that high level. You look at a lot of. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask. Is it storytelling? Is it similar to, and I'll make a tie-in with us as now as grandfathers? Is it that legacy stuff? Is it that passing on? Is it talk about the difficulties that we fought as a team to be where we are, that we need to be reminded of? What's one or two big elements that can help us sustain that?
Yeah, I think some of that's true. I think, we've had other shows where we're talking about the importance of how we frame challenges, right? And what that looks like, and keep us, really feeling good and optimistic. And that's one part of the challenge. The other part is realizing that, okay, so if I was the very best at what I was doing, so I'm going to make a really simple analogy. Let's say you're a great shooter in the NBA and you do, and you're shooting 500 jump shots a day in order to make that happen. Well, you get there and decide, well, I'm a really great shooter now. Maybe I only have to shoot 200 jump shots a day. All of a sudden, maybe, believe it or not, you're not going to be shooting the ball as well anymore. Just that's the way that is. It's like oftentimes you just can't cheat what it takes to stay at a high level and to be thinking about how do I get better. I always thought it was amazing when you look at really great players. There's two things about them. They love to be coached, and they never think they've arrived. They're always looking at how do I improve? How do I get better? Maybe Tiger, to a fault in his career, wanted to get better. He was changing his golf swing all the time. Right. He was doing different things that,
too much tinkering.
Maybe. Yeah. But any great player in any sport is looking at how they can continue to improve. The stories of, the best players who are the ones staying the latest after practice, or the ones getting there the earliest, and those people who never forget, and they outwork people who, how many times, do you hear stories where, and of course I'm dating myself, but it'd be, they're the stories of Jordan and Bird and people like that. Who,
right.
First one in the gym, last one to leave type of stories. And they're like, they're the best player on the team. And for all the other players, they're like, well, how do I go? Like, how do I say, all right, I'm done now. That's it. And they're still practicing.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's really an incredible reminder that, and I think that's where, that's what StrengthsFinders, I think, teaches us a little bit. When we take a StrengthsFinders assessment, we don't get 5 strengths thrown at us. We get 5 talent themes thrown at us, because what they say is that these talents times the investment in those talent will equal it being a strength someday. And so I think these kinds of things, understanding that, but this is where teams can be great at being examples and pushing one another and challenging one another, even if it's just by example. This is hard. Like playing in the NBA, playing in the NHL, playing on the PGA Tour requires like doing the same things that got you here. You're going to have to do that and then some to stay there. And I think for most of us, like I said, there are certainly individuals out there who are extremely driven and self-motivated. But I think for the rest of us mere mortals, we're helped greatly by other people playing roles in our lives, whether it's through encouragement or helping us hold ourselves accountable, or giving us advice or technical expertise, whatever it takes to give us those little things, right? Give us that little edge to keep going and to keep working hard and never forget what it takes to be excellent.
Yeah. It reminds me of that quote or that line by Babe Ruth, it's hard to beat somebody that won't quit. So, when you're surrounded by people who won't quit, certainly helps. Well, let me hawk the book. Haven't done this in a while. So
all right.
If you've not picked up your copy of What Anyone Can Do, this is Leo's latest book. It was released this last fall. How surrounding yourself with the right people will drive change, opportunity, and personal growth. You can't miss it if you go into your favorite bookstore, buy it at Amazon, anywhere books are sold. Audio, I meant to ask you this the last time that we recorded. Audio version of this?
It's supposed to be
not
coming.
Yet?
It's supposed to be coming. I've got to check back again because I get a lot of requests for that, for people who, just love listening to the audiobook in the car and all. And as a reminder too, in terms of the title and where it came from. And again, this was basically a reference to a book that was written in 1976 by Joe Henderson, who is a former editor and writer at Runner's World. And he was talking about running. And he was basically saying, look, when you look at great runners or people who are really great at anything for that matter, he said, in most cases, it isn't because they're capable of superhuman things. They can't leap tall buildings in a single bound. He said, but basically they do the things that anyone can do that most of us just don't. Most of us never will. they're the ones getting up at a certain time in the morning and doing, things. There's a level of discipline and a level of those things we talk about that are required to be excellent at anything. But so the idea of the book really is that when you surround yourself with the right people, they can help you do those little things that anyone can do, but most of us never will, far more often. And that's, I think, when you think about really the gift that keeps on giving and the, the value of those around us, it's very much about that. And so if we want something in our lives, again, we're not Tiger Woods after, multiple surgeries trying to win the Masters. We're, in many cases, we have goals for us that could be lofty, but I think relatively speaking, far more realistic. And,
and yet too many of us still don't. And yet too many of us still don't think that we can do those.
Yeah.
Even the ones that are within reach.
And near the end of the book, we have a little people plan, and it's basically 3 steps. And, you go through that, and you can just start charting out for yourself a little bit about what this looks like. And again, you just keep it in front of you and ever present. And, I think to the extent that, getting back to this issue of accountability / personal responsibility, we can all help one another in that regard. Do the things that we have expressed that we want for ourselves, but realizing that it isn't going to happen because we're hoping, it happens. We're going to have to actually do the work. But there's people there to help us do that. And
speaking of books, we're working on a show, maybe 2, where Leo and I are going to kind of do some book talk. Catch up with some various reading that you've done. I know you've been diving more deeply into books here recently than I have, just due to some personal stuff, but I'm looking forward to those conversations coming up as well.
Yeah, Dr. Diane Hamilton's book, Cracking the Curiosity Code will be one that I want to talk about, certainly. Brian Solis's Life Scale is another one. I definitely, I think of, for me, books is kind of like when people talk about going to the movies, like they don't go to the movies for 6 months or whatever, and then they go see a bunch of films. Well, and I get into that mode too when I feel like I'm writing more than I'm reading, and I think that gets out of balance a little bit, and I want to make sure that I'm constantly feeling like God knows I still have a lot to learn. So I want to make sure that I keep that, coming in, and not just, spend too much in that, in a way that's kind of off balance for us. So I think talking about a lot of their work is extraordinary. I think both books, what I love about both books is, and I think when we get into them too, we'll see how much they reinforce one another. I think it's pretty interesting, and so good
and
stuff.
Regarding teams, if I'll hawk Leo's workshop work, your team, you're looking for, he's got a page at the website. You can find it at Leo Bottary. That's LeoBottary.com. And workshops, I think there's a navigation for workshops or speaking.
It's /speaking, or you'll see on the menu speaking. And there's actually 2 keynotes and 3 workshops that are available. Some are brand new, and others are kind of a 2.0 version. Again, the more of these things you do, the more you learn, and the more you fine tune, and the more you add things that oftentimes are a real product of all of the people that I've had the good fortune to work with during these workshops over time. So, it's kind of nice because it's not just about me leading a workshop and learning from me. It's about creating a context where you learn from one another, and then anything you get from me is from me and the thousands of other people that have contributed to that, right? So I think that's where the real benefit is, and good stuff. But anyway, let's we can probably break for today, but next week let's get on I think
book talk.
We'll do book talk next week.
Yeah,
let's do that.
That'll be good.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
You better have a great day.
To learn more about our show and what we do, to submit questions to us, and to subscribe to What Anyone Can Do podcast, please visit our website, whatanyonecando.com. What Anyone Can Do podcast is hosted by Leo Bottari and me, Randy Cantrell. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod is Vibe Ace, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Thanks for watching or listening. We hope you'll share the podcast.